how many wines you know on top of your head?
Motte, Pinotage, Shiraz, Chardonnay, Malbec. 5. That's it.
Okay, so now we are starting our trip again to wine country.
Wine country. So we're going to Franschhoek this morning, and it's very well known for its vineyards, for its wine tasting, for its restaurants. I'm going to go to a few of those places.
It's not exactly called wine country.
It's not, yeah. The winelands.
Cape Winelands. Yeah.
Cape Winelands.
We're starting up in Cape Winelands is another area. We're starting up in Franschhoek, and we'll see what. I'm not going to drink any wine.
I'm drinking this today. So we're going to Le Motte first. That's one of my favorite wines. I'm going to get a chance to sample some of their wines.
Okay, name me how many wines you know on top of your head.
Motte, Pinotage, Shiraz, Chardonnay, Malbec. 5. That's it.
Tell me the brands that you know.
In 600 meters, turn right.
Okay, Devonville Hills. I know Le Motte, Stellenbosch wines, Reeboks Kloof. There's one from Argentina that I like a lot. I'm not remembering the name right now. Yeah, this is what I got right now.
Tell me No's wine. That's called
That's on your list.
Bonang's wine.
Okay, yes, Benang.
Turn right.
In the UK had a lot of Australian wine. That's what we saw.
Australian
wine.
wines, yeah. And French.
Those had a lot. They had a few South African wines too.
Stellenbosch wines were very common there.
Yeah, in England.
In England, yeah. Always saw the Stellenbosch wines.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really care for wine, so I can't remember the names. Yeah, I'm okay with it. Not a fan.
You like it when you drink it.
Yeah.
We were invited over by Le Motte, and we had a very gracious host who was Lawrence White. He was very, very informative. Let's go on the wine tour.
Was when Europeans first came to the Cape, and they obviously started by setting up Cape Town. They built the castle. They built a port there. As they started expanding and started setting up vineyards, they started planting in Constantia. Van Riebeck wrote in, I think, 1658. Wine was made. Wine was made for the first time from Cape grapes.
Oh wow!
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, Hans Hendrik Hatting was the first owner of La Motte. He had the farm in 1695. He was granted the farm, and in 1701, Pierre Hubert bought the farm and named it La Motte after his home village, La Motte de Higuer. To give you a very kind of brief introduction of how this will be used during harvest.
Yeah.
The red grapes will come in. They come in over at the top there. they go through a destemmer, which is a machine with like metal claws which go through the bunches of grapes and take out the stems. So you've just got the berries themselves.
Right.
The berries go through a crusher, which is two rollers about that round, about that long, and about that far apart, and that just pops each grape so they can be pumped.
Oh.
The grapes are then pumped up into a tank like this. So this will fill all the way up with these grapes, and most of that tank will be juice. The bottom 4/5 will be juice, and all the skins will float up to the top and form a cap about 1 meter deep.
Oh wow, that's
At the beginning, the juice is white and sweet and non-alcoholic. So we add some yeast to the tank. The yeast starts to eat the sugar in the grape juice, turn it into alcohol.
Right.
While that's happening, we pump the juice from the bottom of the tank, out of here, up to the top of the tank, where it mixes with the skins, and that's how it gets the colour. So as the fermentation
Okay.
goes
The skins
on,
are kept for the color.
yeah, so it's got to mix the juice and the skins together to get the colour. So as the fermentation goes on, the juice gets redder and redder, drier and drier, more and more alcoholic, until after about 5 days, that's it, all the sugar's gone.
Wow.
It's now red, 13.5%, 14% alcohol. Then what we do is we pump the wine out of this tank into the next door tank. All the skins fall down here, and then whichever one of the interns has been late for work that morning, they got to go inside the tank and they shovel the skins into the press.
Oh.
The press is like a big tube on wheels, about the same size as one of these, more or less. And inside it is a big inflatable bag, and that's just filled with air, pushes everything against the side of the tube, and then there's lots of little holes that the liquids can run through and collect at the bottom, and then all the skins get discarded. The skins.
Oh wow.
One thing.
That's 16, Merlot, and that's from
That's my favorite.
You can see the amount of tons that were harvested.
Oh, wow.
That is the degrees balling. So we measure sugar in balling.
Right.
As the grapes ripen, the sugar goes up and the acidity goes down. So with each vineyard block, every day one of the winemakers will go out into the vineyard block to pick a couple of bunches of grapes, take the juice to the Vin Lab or to our lab here, and they will analyse the juice and tell us the sugar, which is measured in balling, the pH, and the acidity, which is measured in grams per litre. And we use those numbers to decide when to pick each vineyard block.
Oh wow.
So the grapes can tell you.
The other thing, I mean, you taste the grapes as well, because the other thing you need is what's called physiological ripeness. That is ripeness of the skins and ripeness of the pips. Because sometimes you could have enough sugar to make wine, but if the skins are not ripe and the pips are not ripe, then you will get a wine which is very green and very hard.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of the skill in winemaking or in grape growing is achieving ripe skins and pips without.
Right.
So the temperature there at the moment is 14.9.
Oh,
so that is
okay.
basically ambient. So
Right.
we're not cooling that. We're not heating it. During fermentation, the yeast give out a lot of heat, and you have to cool the tanks down in order to slow the fermentation down,
Right.
to avoid getting kind of burnt flavours in red wine, and to preserve all of the more aromatic characters in white wine. So white wines we ferment quite cold, around 10 to 12 degrees.
Oh, okay.
And red wine's a little bit warmer, around 18 degrees.
Okay.
The MCC has to be made by the champagne method, which is essentially what you do is you take your grapes, so this is 91% Chardonnay and 9% Pinot Noir. We take those grapes, we squeeze the juice out of them, we put the juice into one of those stainless steel tanks, we add some yeast to it, the yeast eats all the sugar in the grape juice, turns it into alcohol, so now you've got a tank full of dry white wine. Then what you do is you put that white wine into a bottle, you add some more sugar, literally the same type of sugar that you put into coffee, same as that, and some more yeast. And you put a little crown cap on, it looks like a beer cap, and it starts a second fermentation in the bottle, and that's what makes it sparkle. So at that point you've got a sparkling wine in a bottle, but you've still got your yeast in there. When you shake it up and hold it up to the light, you can see all the yeast cells drifting around in there. So to get that out, what they do is they put each bottle into a rack. You'll have a long rack, lots of holes in it. You put each bottle in at a 45-degree angle, and you start to turn each bottle an eighth of a turn once a week and gradually stand it up. And after 8 weeks, it's stood up all the way like that. All the yeast has moved into the neck of the bottle here, and then you dip the neck of the bottle into dry ice, and it freezes this part. It traps all that yeast in an ice cube, and then you take off the beer cap, the ice cube shoots out, and normally what you do is you top up with some sweet wine and put the cork on and wire on, and you've got bubbly ready for sale. So that's that's method champenois, method Campassi. What makes this one slightly unusual is, like I said, normally you top up with sweet wine. The reason you do that is when you are making MCC, you have to pick your grapes in mid-January. The reason for that is, like we were saying with the sweet wines in the cellar, yeast doesn't like too much alcohol. So if you pick your grapes in mid-February, like you do for like a Chardonnay, you do your first fermentation, you've already got 13% alcohol, you add yeast to that, it's going to kill the yeast. So you have to pick the grapes earlier with less sugar, so that after the first fermentation you've only got 8% alcohol, so that when you add more yeast and more sugar, it can do another fermentation. But because of that, it's very high in acidity and very low in sugar, so it's almost like lemon juice, very, very bright, and normally you add that sweet wine to balance that out. So this is zero dosage, so this has not had that sweet wine added, but what it has done is we kept it on the lees, which is with the yeast inside the bottle, for 48 months. So it's a long lees contact, and that gives it richness, it gives it fullness, it gives it a much finer bubble. Also 5% of this is from 2017, so we kept some of the base wine back for a year, kept it in barrel to give it richness and fullness, and then blended it back before we did the second fermentation. So I get lots of brioche, nuts, very, very delicate.
Thank you.
Now that's the idea, you want those bubbles to be as small and as fine as possible, because that just makes it more delicate and more elegant. You know, when those bubbles are big and clumsy, they you know, you feel it on the palate. Wines I've poured for you are two Sauvignon Blancs. So on the left-hand side, I poured the Motte Sauvignon Blanc. This is 2023, so this is grapes that were harvested this year. 50% of these grapes come from Stellenbosch. So Stellenbosch, the Sauvignon Blanc is quite a warm region. You're going to tend towards more tropical fruits. 25% of the fruit comes from Franschhoek, and 25 comes from a place called Napier, which is also close down to Cape Agulhas, which is a much cooler climate region.
Right.
So overall, this Sauvignon Blanc is going to feature more tropical fruits. I get a lot of grass, I get cut grass, I get pineapple, guava, passion fruit. Imagine cutting a grenadilla in half, that smell you get.
Oh yes.
It's exactly what I get on the Sauvignon Blanc. This has got 5% Semillon. Semillon is a traditional blending partner with Sauvignon Blanc. It tends to give a bit more richness, a bit more boldness to the Sauvignon Blanc. And it's made only in stainless steel. We don't use barrels for Sauvignon Blanc, because barrels make wine softer and rounder. And for a wine like this, you want it to be crisp and fresh, and that's what's going to make it refreshing on a hot day. Is that nice acidity? You don't want to lose that.
That's actually good.
Very pineapple.
Yeah. One of the common misconceptions with tasting wine is people look at the legs.
Oh yes,
Basically, the higher in alcohol and the higher in glucose that the wine is, the more defined those legs will be and the slower that they will move. So,
Because it's full body, that's the thing to say.
really it comes back to 200 years ago. If you were a British aristocrat, you'd be sat in your stately home in England and you'd be drinking Bordeaux. And Bordeaux is a much colder wine growing region than the Cape is. In South Africa, our best vintages are normally our coolest ones because the grapes ripen more slowly and you get more even ripeness and you get physiological ripeness at lower sugars. In Bordeaux, their best vintages tend to be their hottest vintages because in Europe it's not so dissimilar to England, where in Bordeaux maybe 3 times a decade it will rain so much that very little of their fruit they'll be able to use. They won't get ripe grapes with a lot of their fruit. So their best vintages tend to be their warmest ones. So when you were an English aristocrat, you could sit in your stately home and you could see that it was a high alcohol vintage and therefore a good vintage in Bordeaux, and you could say, this must be a good vintage. But actually, we grow wine now all around the world, and high alcohol and high sugar is not necessarily it doesn't show you very much about the quality of the wine.
Right.
So it's not so much a valid test anymore.
But
If you know it's Bordeaux, it's still a valid test. A good smell. And when you taste it, what we do is we tilt your head forward slightly and suck air through the wine. And what that does 2 things. It helps oxygenate the wine, which helps it wake up, and it also sprays it over your palate. So it goes something like this.
Oh.
And then I spit it out because I can't drink away.
I'm the same, I'm driving.
It's funny how it makes the wine taste so much more intense, and it becomes addictive to the point where I'll be at home in England and we'll be sat around the dinner table and I'll be going like this, and my mum will be kicking me under the table.
That's part of your work.
So the other Sauvignon Blanc I gave you
Oh yes. That's like of course it's got a higher palate.
you can taste the wine much more intensely than that.
Yeah.
Helps you distinguish.
That's the first time I've tasted wine like that.
It does work.
It does.
That's how the
Saliva glands like actually still be salivating.
flavor picks up.
Wow. You get the kind of like fruity taste, like a main pineapple. Wow.
This is actually a right bank style blend. It's 51% Merlot, 35 Cabernet Franc, 10 Cabernet Sauvignon, and 4 Petit Verdot.
That's the left.
This is 14. It's on the left-hand side, yeah. It's 14 months in French oak barrel, and these are all older barrels. There's no new ones.
Everything red wine.
It's not old.
Yeah, I know you're doing this one.
I get blackcurrant, cherry, tobacco, fruit cake.
And this is cherry and tobacco.
Yeah, it's strong, yeah, it's strong.
So the last wine that we make is the Hanley Arm, named for Hanley Rupert. So, I mean, when you make a wine and you name it after the owner of the farm, you've got to make sure you do a good job. And I think we did with this. Yes. So this is 58% Syrah, also from that cool climate vineyard down in Elim, that coffee chicken vineyard. 22% Grenache and 20% Durif. And spends 36 months in French oak barrels, big 600 litre barrels, and all new, so 100% new. It's incredibly full, rich, powerful. It's from 2017, which, like I said, was the middle of the drought vintages, and it was considered one of the best vintages in the last 40 years in South Africa. Incredible richness, plum, red berry, but beautifully smooth and soft as well.
Yeah, it's smooth.
Yeah. It's not like a nice like when it goes down.
Yeah. And it's not as much. Yeah.
You gotta. That's what we talk about. Length is that long aftertaste that doesn't go away. The way I always explain it is, think about the way the flavours deliver to your palate. You don't. If you get a burst of fruit and then it goes away quickly, it's not going to age well. It's not considered as good a wine as one where you get the same intensity of flavour right when it touches your lips, right up until the end of the finish. It's very linear flavour.
Very interesting.
Yeah, thanks so much for
There we go. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to have to
I really
go
like
back to
this.
office.
Oh yes.
But thank you, and yeah.
Alright, so we just finished off our wine tasting and our tour of the Motte vineyard, and I must say it was such an incredible experience to get a chance to taste some of the reserve wines. We've had a range from white wines into the rosé, into the red wine. For me personally, I've always enjoyed a red wine, but getting a chance to taste some white wines changed my mindset a little bit, because I really enjoyed the Chardonnay. I also enjoyed the Sauvignon Blanc, so those were quite nice. Alright, so everything from the tasting to learning about the history of the Motte vineyard was absolutely incredible, and also the highlight for me would have been getting a chance to go behind the scenes and see the entire distillation process from the barrels to the bottling. Everything was absolutely amazing. So the next time you're in Cape Town, be sure to visit the Motte vineyard, and you will have such a great experience here.